Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host. And I'd like to ask you, are you hot? What do I mean by that? Maybe we can be hot or not. We're going to talk about hot or not.
Hot or not.
To help us talk about hot or not is our guest who's been on many shows with me, and we love to talk with each other. And she's amazing. She's written a bunch of books. One of them recently is Find and Follow Your Inner Compass. And then a great older book of hers is Are You Happy Now?, which never runs out of time. And then The Awakening Human Being, A Guide to the Power of Mind. So we're going to be mindfully talking about hot or not. Barbara Berger, welcome.
Well, hot or not, I don't know if you've heard, but Europe, we are in a deep freeze. It is so, I don't know if it makes the news in the United States, but it's so freezing, Siberian cold here in Europe, and tons of snow everywhere. So we're definitely not very hot.
No, and here it's hot. It's almost 60 degrees today.
Really?
Yeah. And it was 78 last week.
In New York?
Yes.
How can that be? It's about minus, let's see, we have Celsius here, but it's like minus 15.
Oh my God.
Like minus 15 Fahrenheit. I mean, it's...
Wow. That's really cold.
Really...
That's why we were doing a show about hot. So...
I'm so thankful we have heat.
Good. So what I'd really like to talk with you about is sexuality in terms of our eroticism, in terms of our gender roles, actually. Because it's hot on both sides. Both genders get hot. and yet, because we live in a male-dominant society, a lot of that is really out of balance. And we do need to talk about our inner compass and being true to ourselves in a society that a lot of it is expected of us that we can't always meet, and in ways that aren't always honorable. And some people expect things of us that really aren't good for us, and yet they're run by this heat that I think all humans have, not necessarily working correctly in every person. Because would you like to read that quote that you told me about? Because I think that really can pertain to this.
I thought that would be really a good thing to start with. George Michael, our beloved George Michael, he said from his song, I Want Your Sex. Sex is natural, sex is good. Not everybody does it, but everybody should.
And it would be nice if everyone felt that way.
Well,
and we could all get along better. But there's so many taboos and so much abuse.
Well, I think actually what you're talking about, what comes to mind listening to what you're saying is, I mean, we have our sort of our genuine, original, pristine nature, and then we're all born into this society, the different societies, the different cultures, and we get programmed. I mean, we're the innocence of our consciousness. We get born into, as you were saying, depending on our sex with the gender roles, we get programmed with so much stuff which is not it doesn't promote, you could say, healthy interactions with our fellow human beings. So that's really the challenge for us, our programming versus our intrinsic nature, you could say.
Right, the intrinsic nature, I think, is very important to understand, is that our species, like all species, are designed to procreate. The only way we can survive is to have more babies. And the only way we can get more babies is to have enough sex. And the only way we're going to have enough sex is if we desire it.
It has to feel good, right?
Well, that's what promotes it. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just test tubes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're born to get hot. And not only just get hot, but get hot in ways that we can't
Wait a
explain.
second. Even before you proceed from that, I would say that it's important to understand that the human beings, we are the only species who have evolved. We have evolved mentally, psychologically, spiritually. We're not just biologically driven. So that's also confusing for
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, because again, the animals, they don't have the mental. We have this mental, we can think, we can, and we're becoming more and more spiritually attuned too. So we have different layers of our being. So I would say that the biological animal nature is not the whole picture anymore. That's also confusing.
Our society tries to organize itself all the time in ways that can be extremely limiting,
That's for sure.
and other ways that expand us and we grow and evolve. And so there are so many ways that this natural species instinct to procreate is limited by the structure of all the organizations around us that have all kinds of taboos and are very strict. In some societies are, as we know, fundamental societies are extremely strict and
Mm-hmm.
are afraid of it. And yet they know they also have to procreate. And so they have rules.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of fundamental religions have rules on having sex, in most cases in ways that it's not supposed to be meaningful, at least for the women. They're just supposed to be receivers.
It's very interesting to hear you talk to, I live in Scandinavia, which is,
Very open.
yes, exactly. I mean, I remember when I first came here, and that's many years ago, from the United States, the shock of how liberal it is here, how open-minded, how free the people were. Also in terms of sex, I mean, Denmark, where I live, they have always been known as one of the most sexually open societies. It's the first country that legalized gay marriages. And I mean, in the beginning when I came here, I mean, the way people acted, it was really shocking, because I mean, you would go to the beach and people would get undressed, and it was like nobody batted an eye. But whereas other places, I remember the first time my mother and father came here, my mother said, "Oh, you would get arrested for doing that in Florida."
Sure.
So it's definitely true that that's the social programming, the social norms, they vary greatly.
And yet it doesn't really change the nature of sexuality, because it's not like all these people were constantly having orgies. They just were naturally nude and it didn't bother them so much. And yet there are societies that are very strict and they really don't know what to do with it, because they have all these rules against them. Actually, I have a client recently who's working full-time as a dominatrix. And she told me that a lot of the customers that come in for her, torture chamber
Services, her services.
are fundamentalists.
Okay, isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
They have to sublimate somewhere, right?
exactly. And so everybody's got it. Look at all these.
Yeah, but again, what you're really saying is, again, if you would say that the way we've been programmed, how much it inhibits the natural flow of energy in us, and
Right.
Sexual energy is, I mean, it's a powerful drive.
And look at all the gurus who preach celibacy, and yet they get caught with their pants down. So
it's complicated, right?
Well, it's not. It's easily understandable when you look at this drive, the species drive to procreate. Now, another thing is that we're all different. And so there are a lot of people who don't get hot. There are a lot of people who just aren't sexually designed.
Do you know that for a fact?
Yes.
How do you know that?
For one thing, because I work with the human design system, and I've had thousands of clients, and the human design system actually shows in the second chakra whether it's active or not. And a lot of people have an inactive second chakra. And I'll say, how's your sex life? And they'll say, oh, it's okay. And I'll say, well, how often do you have sex? And they'll say, oh, I don't know, not very much. Well, you just said it was okay. I'll say, yeah, but we don't think about it. And, my wife and I, if both of them have inactive sex chakras, occasionally they'll bump into each other. It'll feel good. They'll have sex. And then they just won't think about it for some months and, or maybe years.
Interesting.
And then there are people who are just so driven. And I've worked with couples who one person is designed.
That's really a problem.
Driven, and the other person is designed to not be that interested.
That's, again, I do a lot of coaching too, as you notice. That's really a problem. But I think the other thing that I've noticed too, I coach a lot of younger people also, and I'm so surprised at how little interest they have in sex compared to when we. I mean, it's sometimes
it's different. It is different.
It's really different. But I find it kind of shocking. It's like.
No, and let me explain why it's not. Okay?
You know the answer. You know the answer to that question.
Our population we have a population problem. And I think there's an innate species energy that is allowing us to manage that better.
No? Okay, that's an interesting thought. So in other words, that there's less sex drive because we don't need so many people at the moment.
Right.
That's for sure. That's really interesting. I've really noticed it. I mean,
yes.
The couples, when they come to me, and I mean, then I usually get, then I'll take them separately. And when I ask them how often they have sex, so seldom. And it's like, and they're gorgeous, wonderful, lovely people, but I'm just shocked.
Yeah, and there's no reason for it other than there's something going on that we don't understand that in general. And I think it has to do with the fact that it's, there's something innate in our species that is managing itself.
But how do you square that with the fact that the different? I mean, Europe is having we're having this refugee crisis, as you have heard. A lot of people coming from the Middle East, and all these migrants, and it's a really big problem for all our societies. And they have a lot of children compared to the Europeans.
Well, they also have a lot of complex rules, and they're also driven very sexually. And very often when there are limitations, it can create some aberration of.
Because that doesn't really square with your idea that the whole species the population has grown so much so we don't need so many people.
No, but I don't believe that these fundamental communities are as soul developed as other communities. In other words, they're not.
They have a different calibration level.
Yeah.
But that's interesting that you said, because that's what I meant before when I said that it plays into all this, the evolution of consciousness, the development of the consciousness. It varies from society to society. There's no question about that.
Right.
And that plays into that would be my explanation also of what you just said. That why is it that some parts of the world population, they procreate a lot and others do much less?
Right. So we have to appreciate, that, and I did actually a radio show about this recently about soul development. And there are many, many souls now around who are influential, who are only intermediate level souls who are developed enough to use their power that they've gained in life, smart enough to be powerful, but not in a way to use it legitimately. And because their souls just, there's something missing. And you look at a lot of people in the world who have power in corporations, in politics, in religion, who you just wonder what they're talking about. They don't, because it doesn't make sense.
Are you familiar with David Hawkins and the calibration levels?
Yes.
Yeah, because he has this with the muscle testing,
Right.
that the various calibration levels, it really does explain exactly what you're talking about in terms of the evolution of consciousness, and we have these different frequencies,
Yes.
and the lower frequencies, that's what you're talking about.
Yes. And a
So
lot of societies, souls are born into those societies because that's what they're ready for.
right, the level of consciousness.
Yes. And so that's changing. I mean, we are in a time where we're all being hit with these new energies from the center of our galaxy and our sun that are evolving our consciousness,
Hmm.
so that a lot of people are waking up that haven't been awakened before.
A
And
lot, a
yeah,
lot.
you have, you know,
Yeah.
your book, The Awakening Human Being.
Thank you,
So
thank you.
you're on top of that. So,
Yeah.
so we have to really appreciate that what we're seeing is temporary.
Mm.
And many of these societies are going to shift as all of a sudden there's a new awakening that uh, has us thinking in ways that we never thought before.
Isn't that exciting?
Well, I love it because it really represents being able to hold ideas that we couldn't even imagine before. And we said, how come I never thought of that before?
Mm.
Our brains couldn't comprehend it before.
So exciting. It's so exciting. Don't you love it?
Well, I'm of course, and you know, and it actually helps me be more hopeful for the future,
Mm.
facing so much of what we're facing, especially the politics of America are
Mm.
ridiculous now.
I mean, again, I live in Europe, as I say, the Europeans are, the Scandinavians where I live, it's like people are just so shocked at what's going on in the United States. How can it be? How can it be? What's
How can
going
people
on?
be so stupid?
Yes, exactly. You said it.
Right, right. And
And the whole thing with the guns and the weapons and the gun controls is like, ah, really?
but this is the intermediate level soul
Mm,
that understands power in very primitive ways.
mm,
And so that's why there's so many people out there don't know how to relate to arms
mm.
and can only think in terms of power, not of peace. And so there are so many ways that our society is revealing how toxic it is because of this.
Mm.
And I think a lot of these intermediate souls are going to advance in consciousness.
That's a good thought. Let's keep that one. I like that one.
Yeah,
That's a
because
good thought.
at this point you can't even talk to them.
No,
And
and
they
that's
grew up.
but it's true that the whole thing that's the really important point that what you're saying, that the fact that it's so hard to have a respectful conversation today. That seems to me that that's the biggest challenge. If we look at the nature of reality, and the nature of reality is that we're all evolving souls, and each person is unique, and we're all different. So that's the setup. So we can, the challenge is, how do we navigate wisely in relationship to reality, which is
By
the,
understanding it better. That's
but
why
also,
we're
but
talking.
but the whole idea, what my point, what I was trying to drive at here, is that if we can't even have a respectful conversation, in other words, that we have a foundation which says, you're you, and you have a right to be you, and you have your thoughts and emotions and your level of consciousness, and I'm me, and I have my background and my thoughts and emotions, and that the basic respect for that as a prerequisite to the fact that, okay, so we have these various areas where we have joint projects or mutual interests. How are we going to navigate and negotiate workable compromises so that, that we can meet and live in peace and harmony?
Through new consciousness. And in the meantime, we just have to understand that a lot of what we have to say to certain people can't be heard. And yet we're going to keep trying until we hope it can be heard. So all we can do is keep on doing our best. And I think the younger populations are much more evolved and much more ready to change society and make it a better world. And they don't have their power yet, but they're starting to. and they don't realize how, and maybe we're going to see more of that in the United States, for instance, of school children boycotting and actually influencing politics.
That would be great. I mean, you
Yeah.
can see with the kids from Florida, they've been pretty vocal. So
Right,
that's,
but it
yeah.
needs to spread a lot, and I don't know if it's going to spread enough yet, but I hope it does. So, so it's fascinating that, we're talking about how complex it is in humanity versus all the other species on this planet are not, self-destructive as ours has been. And, we're so advanced, well, we're destroying the planet, we're destroying each other. What's so advanced about that?
Well, that's why when the advanced being in species, the species in space look down at our planet, they say there's no intelligent life there, so we're not going there, right? That's why
well, all the animals are intelligent. As a matter of fact, my show on Friday will be somebody who talks with animals and the wisdom that they have. So I'm very excited about living on a planet with animal life that's really much more open.
Yeah, in tune, you could say. But again, the problem is they don't have the mental aspect that the humans have. That's the
Maybe that's our problem rather than.
wow. Again, that's the what is the difference? I mean, you have this wonderful dog, for example, who's always present in the now, timeless awareness, who doesn't worry about the past and not planning for the future, and who's just happy. I mean,
full of love,
yeah.
and that's really the bottom line. But humans are, as I said, are so not only complex but programmed, and that's why you have your book, Find and Follow Your Compass, because it's so really important for us, to understand everything that we're saying and not be influenced by the stupidity around us.
Well, in that book, I talk a lot about that's what the inner compass is, to try to be in alignment with the higher consciousness, your higher self, or whatever you want to call it. And that I call it the difference between self-referral and other referral. And that's what you're saying, that people today are so programmed to look get their cues from other people, from the media, from social media, so they lose the connection here. And that's
right. And coming back to our sexuality, what's interesting is that when you're hot, and all of a sudden there are all these, taboos, and many of them for good reason. You can't impose yourself and abuse somebody. But now, because of all the media attention to it, you don't know how to be hot in any way that might not into trouble.
I think I would say it a little bit differently. I mean, there's no reason why we can't be hot, but we have to have healthy boundaries. We have to respect, I might be attracted to this person, and this person might not be attracted to me.
Right.
I mean, so we're talking about, I mean, in terms of the women and men, I mean, that when a woman says no.
Right. The good news is that we're learning more about the language of it.
Yeah, but again, what is so difficult to understand about the word no? So again, but as you say, there's been so much confusion around,
and male dominance and male abuse. And
I agree. I mean, I've lived a long time and had a lot of relationships, so I've got plenty of experience on that track there.
Right. So we're learning. This is all a learning process, and finding our way to respect each other's boundaries and understand our own needs of, exploring our own desires, but doing it appropriately.
Exactly. Respectfully, respecting the other in our lives. It's really been very problematic. I mean, I've, like every woman, have had these experiences. Me too. That's why it's me too. So, I mean, I don't say it lightly, but again, how difficult is it to understand the word no?
Right, but also.
But that's just the principle
No, Barbara, a lot of women don't know how to say no clearly enough because they're also trying to please others and cooperate.
Exactly. I understand that. It's complicated.
Yeah, it's
It's definitely
complicated.
complicated.
Right. But
Mm,
the more it's publicized now, the
mm.
more women are getting their voice and are more proud to say no and, more assertive, and men are more attentive. So I think,
That's a good thing.
yeah, it's promising for the
Mm,
future.
mm.
So it's always so exciting to talk with you because you and I both are seeking, new ways of understanding things and appreciating how conversation can grow new ideas. And so it's been a lot of fun exploring life with you over a number of shows.
One day maybe we'll meet face to face.
That would be great. Yeah, I would love to visit Scandinavia at some point.
Great,
I've been there
great.
before. I was in Denmark
Have
in
you been here?
19,
Okay.
1962.
62.
You weren't even there then.
No, I wasn't even there then. Right.
I couldn't find you anywhere.
No, you couldn't find me anywhere. Copenhagen is really a great place. I love it here.
Oh, good. And so, yeah, and it's interesting for people in this country to explore how other societies are succeeding or not.
Mm,
And I think we can learn so much from a lot of what Scandinavia is doing.
right, right. I agree. It's a good place here.
Right.
I
So,
think actually one of the things that they're good at too is it's kind of something that is really promoted and developed from a very young age. That people are taught that they have to have a conversation. I mean, everyone is very involved in social issues here and politics and also the whole thing about so that they actually it's encouraged. So that's a really good thing.
yeah, and there's, again, we come back to genders and how genders communicate. And, men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Well, that's actually also really interesting that you say that too. Just another thing that I had a really, really hard time understanding when I first came to Scandinavia was that the women were so much more powerful and dominant than the women were in the United States. That was
Yeah,
a big shock to me.
and we can talk more about how genders work, but we are reaching the end of the show.
No. Okay, good. Time flies, Peter. Time flies, and we can continue. Thank you for having me one more time.
Well, we'll do some more, I'm sure, because we both enjoyed talking with each other. So Barbara Berger, Beam Team,
Theme
BEAM.
team, right.
Yeah.
And some of your listeners have been actually, we're giving away this free ebook at the moment, The Mental Laws, Understanding the Way the Mind Works. Quite a few of your listeners have requested it.
Beamteam.com. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks so much for being a guest on Energy Stew again. And this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.fm. I can be reached at peter@heartriver, HEART river.org, or 212-222-7748. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.